Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning. I know how busy and crazy June can be, so I'm hoping I can share a practical idea that you could perhaps use in your setting, focusing on early literacy. So I'm Nicole Davey. This year my role has been a vice principal and teacher librarian, and this webinar is exploring reading coaches, using an inquiry model to empower students to be teaching and learning resources for each other. So I'd just like to start by setting up our learning intention for the webinar. I'd like to share our story of how we used inquiry to create a structure that activates peer coaches in a cross-grade setting, and our goal was to support primary literacy. And I'd also like you to think about how this could potentially look in your context. And I'd like to share a little bit about our context. So I live in Smithers, BC, in the beautiful Bulkley Valley in northern British Columbia. My school is Walnut Park Elementary School. It has about 350 students. We are a K-7 school, and we have 15 divisions currently, and we will continue to have 15 divisions next year as well. And I'd like to take you back to where it began. So this is Lynn Rutley, and 3 years ago, she as a teacher librarian at the time, were part of the Changing Results for Young Readers initiative and the Network of Inquiry and Innovation, two very powerful professional learning frameworks in BC. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them. And we wanted to work together on an inquiry. And this is what our inquiry turned out to be. In what way will older students teaching younger students reading strategies impact reading engagement, comprehension, and fluency? And once again, the real focus was looking at how to support early literacy in our school. But before we got to an actual inquiry question, we started at the beginning of the inquiry process. And this spiral of inquiry, I'm sure, is not new to many of you. It provided a framework for us to embark upon something new, and it's something that we as a school often go to when we are looking at implementing something new in our classrooms or in our school. And so we started at the beginning with scanning, looking very intently on what was going on for our learners. So in the fall, we gathered our data. We used reading assessments, and in our district, we used the EPRA and the DART. We had anecdotal evidence and observations from our learner support teachers and our classroom teachers, and we also used the information gathered from our class reviews in September, which identified the strengths and needs of our students. And what we discovered, definitely we discovered the students who were struggling in literacy. We realized that many students were not finding joy or pleasure in reading. We had many of what we would call reluctant readers. And we also noticed that students lacked metacognitive skills when it came to reading strategies. So when we asked them, how do you figure out a word you don't know, or what do you do when something doesn't make sense, they really had limited responses. Sounding it out, looking at the pictures were the two main ones, but beyond that, they really couldn't explain how they came to understand the text that they were reading. So based on the scanning, we moved to focusing, and we just looked at our larger school environment. We noticed that our students really enjoyed working with their buddy classes on a variety of cross-grade activities. And all of our classes had a buddy class, and they worked usually weekly, either buddy reading or doing some other fun activity. And this was really enjoyable for both classes. And the teachers really liked it as well. So we already had a focus on literacy as a school goal, but we felt we needed to do something different to reach students who were struggling in their reading. But we wanted it to be targeted, and we wanted it to be ongoing. And then we also looked at our older students, our grade 6 and 7 students, and noticed that they often enjoyed taking on leadership activities in the school. And then Lynn and I moved on to creating some hunches. We wondered if could our older students become teachers of reading to younger students, what we called reading coaches. And we wondered if teachers would be willing to participate in this initiative. And we wondered if the older students would be willing to take on this responsibility. In order to further our understanding on teaching reading, of course, our inspiration, a lot of it came from Maureen Dockendorf and Faye Brownlee through the Changing Results for Young Readers initiative. But of course, we also looked at other sources, Richard Allington's work, the Daily 5, the Daily Cafe, and Reading Power. And then we moved to action. So we approached the teachers in our school and asked if they were interested. So if the primary teachers were interested in having reading coaches work with some of their students, and asking if the grade 6 and 7 teachers would be willing to support their students being reading coaches. They all were interested, which was wonderful, and then we put the invitation out to all grade 6 and 7 students. And we made sure that the invitation was open to all. We wanted to encourage anyone who had an interest to come and check it out, and we really made sure that we, encourage students that might not typically take on leadership roles within the school, and invited them to come and join us as well. So after they knew what they were getting into, we began our training, and the training happened during our lunch hours. And we had about 30 reading coaches who agreed to make a commitment for the year. So the instruction, we really had to start at the beginning with basics. So as mentioned before, the grade 6 and 7 students also could not rely on metacognitive strategies as well. They couldn't really explain what skills they used in order to read and decode and make meaning of text. So we had to back up and teach them some strategies, especially metacognitive strategies, focusing on the pre-reading, during reading, and post-reading. So we explained the EEK, making sure that you're sitting elbow to elbow, knee to knee, looking at pre-reading strategies of warming up the book, making sure that they understood the importance of predictions, accessing background knowledge, encouraging questions. And for a lot of the students, this was something that was new to them. They thought reading was just sounding out words on a page, decoding, and we really had to stress that reading really was thinking and making meaning, and that the conversation that you have with the student was just as important as being there to help them with their actual decoding and reading. We looked at using during reading strategies. So does it look right? Does it sound right? Does it make sense? We really emphasized that your job was not to give them the word, but to help them access strategies so that they could figure these things out on their own. And of course, during reading, making sure that they would stop, pay attention to the pictures and the text features, point them out, and continue on with predictions and questions. And then we used after reading strategies as well, where we asked the reading coaches to make sure that the younger student would reflect on the story. Was it easy or hard? How did you help yourself understand? Did you like the story? And can you make any connections? And it was really important that the reading coaches were using the same language as the primary teachers used when they were giving their reading instruction. So the students were hearing it in their classrooms, and then it was being reinforced when they were working with their reading coaches. And this is just an example of some of the strategies and the language that was used in the classroom, and then the reading coaches used it as well. Now the structure, it did take some organization at the very beginning of the year to set up the structure. So for each primary class, they were assigned 4 to 6 reading coaches who would arrive at a set time twice a week for 30 minutes. And this is where you did have to meet with the grade 6 and 7 teachers to make sure that the times that they were available could match up with the times that the primary teachers felt was best. And most often the times were first thing in the morning or right after lunchtime. So that transition time often was a good time. Once the reading coaches would come and pick up the student during their reading coach time, they would take them to a quiet space within the school. They had the choice of where they wanted to work. They knew it had to be not a hiding spot, but somewhere that they could work quietly. And then the teachers often obviously chose the students who needed extra support, but sometimes they chose students who needed some enrichment, and sometimes they chose students who just needed some one-on-one, and maybe the focus wasn't always necessarily on literacy, but just on students who needed a good start to the day or who needed some support transitioning into the day. And then we spent a lot of time with the reading coaches making sure they understood the idea of a good fit book. The teacher librarian worked with the classroom teacher to make sure that they had a baggie filled with books that were at the student's level. They either kept the books in the classroom or they kept them in a bin in my office, which was easily accessible. So the reading coaches would make sure they had their books, would make sure they had their younger student, and then they would go find their spot and away they went. The reading coaches also were responsible for swapping out the books. So if the books were too hard or if they were too easy, they would come to me or Lynn, the teacher librarian, and make an adjustment. So it was really interesting hearing the language that they were using when they would come to me and say, you know, this book is too easy, I think we should go up a level. Do you have any books on cars? He's really interested in cars. So the reading coach was really trying to make sure that the books were at the right level and engaging for the younger student. And then we had the lanyards and the badges. So each reading coach received a laminated badge on a lanyard, and on the front had their name, and on the back had some reading strategies to help remind them of what they were going to be working on. And at first it was just a great way for us to know if we saw a student in the hallway and they had their badge, we knew that they were doing their job, but it soon became a really important symbol of their role in the school, and they were very, very proud to wear their badge. And it was funny, something very simple like a laminated piece of paper actually grew to become a very important symbol of their leadership within the school. So after we began the program, we did regular check-ins, and we did regular check-ins with the teachers, and we did regular check-ins with the reading coaches. And they did need a lot of reinforcement in terms of the reading strategies. And in the beginning, Lynn and I would circulate during reading coach time, and there were different times depending on what classes reading coaches were working with. And we would just make sure that they were using the strategies correctly, making sure they understood that their job was to support the students with the reading strategies, not to read to them or to give them the words. And what we found very quickly was the reading coaches quickly moved into a routine. They knew what they had to do, they knew where the books were, they knew where the student was, they knew the schedule. So teachers really didn't have to remind the reading coaches at all, and they themselves created a really consistent routine. They were on time and on task, which was really, really cool to see. And during the times that we had reading coaches, if you walked around the school, you would see these little partners all over the place, in the hallway, in back foyers, sitting elbow to elbow, knee to knee, doing their reading. Now, based on our check-ins, we would adjust and adapt our actions. So one of the things that we noticed was we did have to adjust the reading strategies or add new reading strategies. And we made sure that the strategies that the reading coaches used reflected what was going on in the primary classrooms, but we also had a school-wide focus on literacy. So we had someone on staff who would provide some professional development on a reading strategy or a writing strategy, and then the reading coaches would also then reinforce it during their time. And an example was using a comprehension strategy using story grammar. So they were able to reinforce what was going on in their classroom with what they were doing in their reading coach session. And our findings. Well, when we really reassessed at the end of the year and looked at the data once again, we realized that the program really ran itself. It required some organization and some oversight and some check-ins, but the grade 6 and 7s really rose to this responsibility. And we saw consistent engagement in both the reading coaches and in the younger students. We saw engagement in the activity itself, but we also saw true engagement in reading. The grade 6 and 7 students truly rose and embraced their role as leaders in the school and as role models. And something that we discovered that was really, really important is that some of the grade 6 and 7 students that would not regularly see themselves as leaders became leaders. And I think it's really, really important that we encourage students who might not necessarily step up to take this on. It was very, very positive for many students. And of course, we saw an increase in fluency and comprehension in the younger students, and teachers were able to see this and monitor this, almost on a monthly basis. And especially we saw how quickly the students were able to increase the reading level as we swapped out the books for increasingly more difficult books. And then we saw metacognitive skills increased in both the younger students and in the reading coaches themselves. So definitely the older reading coaches, their reading abilities increased. And then we also saw this genuine love of reading kind of filter throughout our school, and that was really exciting to see. We also found that surprisingly, our reading coaches actually had a high status in our school, and that our grade 4s and 5s can't wait to get to grade 6 and 7 so that they too can be a reading coach. It really fostered authentic relationships between the older students and the younger students that we saw trickle into the hallways and onto the playgrounds. And you can see when the older students would run into the younger students, the high fives, the smiles, the hugs, and it was genuine. And it really also contributed to our culture of caring and belonging. Something else we noticed is that the older students became very self-initiating, and more than once I had a grade 7 student come to me and say, well, I've noticed that there's this little one in this grade that I would really like to work with. And so we were able to create those connections, which was always a positive thing, and teachers were always really encouraging and happy to accommodate that. And again, we saw the confidence in the older students in their leadership role within the school. And the ripple effect, we saw this coaching culture move beyond reading coaches. And as I mentioned before, we have often chosen younger students who might not even need support in literacy become part of the reading coach program because they need a connection with others. They need that one-on-one time with someone. They need a really calming, positive transition into the school. And a really good example, we had 2 grade 7 students who were not strong readers themselves, who were paired with 2 grade 2 students who actually were strong readers. And while the structure was still the reading coach structure, the intent really wasn't a literacy focus, it was a social emotional focus. And those 2 little boys just beam when they know that their grade 7 coaches are coming for them. And these boys, who typically would not see themselves as leaders, have never ever failed to arrive on time and positive and ready to go for those little guys. And again, we see this spill out into the playground, and it's a really lovely positive impact on the kids. And now a reading coach is a strategy that we consider if we are having meetings, school-based team meetings, looking at how to support some students who are struggling. It is one of our structures that we consider to support kids. And we often add students to our reading coach program throughout the year. So we've just finished our 3rd year, and I am moving out of the teacher-librarian role, unfortunately, which I loved. but our new vice principal that's coming in will be taking over that role, and the reading coach program is definitely something that is just part of what we do, and it will definitely continue. And that was the first thing that teachers asked about when they heard of some of the changes that were coming down, is will this program continue? And it absolutely will. So we've had over 75 reading coaches, and hundreds of primary students have benefited, and it's just really now part of what we do at Walnut Park. So talking to our reading coaches, these are some of the things that they've said about the program. I feel like I understand my own reading better. I make a difference to someone. I used to not really care about younger kids, but now I look for Jesse to make sure that he's okay. I never realized that you could actually use strategies to read. I just thought you looked at the words and read. So this has made me a better reader. What our younger students have said, I like my reading coach. She's nice. She makes me happy. My behavior is good with her. He makes me even better at reading. He helps me learn the words and doesn't just tell me them. I like reading coaches. They're fun. I like having someone work with me all by myself. And our teachers have given feedback as well. It's made a real difference to the fluency and confidence of my students. I appreciate having a structure I can rely on. And the students look forward to working with their reading coaches even in June. They never seem to get tired of it. And it's something that I've come to rely on as a literacy support. It is so positive, and it makes a difference in the reading of my learners. And so I am just wondering how this might look in your context. And the big ideas really are shifting from a buddy approach to a coaching model. So that's that intentional instruction on the teaching piece, and making sure that the coaches are teachers of reading. And there's lots of different ways to support cross-grade opportunities, even in secondary schools, including secondary students. And we haven't done the reading coach program with a secondary class, but we have other programs and projects that we've used that has included secondary students coming down and teaching the kids here. And then, of course, it just creates a culture of coaching, and it embraces students being teaching and learning resources for each other, which is something that we always aspire to and hold in high regard. So that is it. So thank you very much for listening, and I think now Kevin might be taking some questions for me.
Thank you very much, Nicole. I really appreciate a great overall picture of the program that you've created in your school, and not just how it's impacting the reading levels for your younger students, but how it's really had such a positive effect on your school culture. So yes, thank you. I do have a couple of questions from our attendees. One of our attendees works in a K-5 school and wondering, do you think grade 5s would be mature enough and old enough to act as reading coaches? What are your thoughts on that?
I would say absolutely. You might just have to adjust the reading strategies that they would use and just adapt it to their level, but absolutely I think they would be great leaders for the younger students. And you just might have to be strategic if you are using the grade 5s, just making sure that your choice of older students with younger students makes sense.
Good, thank you. So if for any of our attendees out there who are interested in launching something similar in their schools, what would your advice be in terms of a starting point for them?
Well, I think working with your teacher librarian is key. They have that big picture view of the school, and they have access to the books and to all of the students. And it's a really easy program. Once teachers understood what it would look like, we didn't have for 1 second anybody have any concerns. So I'd just say, partner with your teacher librarian. Do some scanning of your school, the needs of the teachers and the needs of the kids, and you could definitely adapt the structure to fit, your context, your setting, and the needs of your students. And very little is required to jump into it starting in the fall.
Good. So I'm kind of curious, Nicole. So was there any pre-work you had to do with parents before you launched the program? I can just, assume that some parents would perhaps scratch their heads. Well, you've got, isn't that teachers' work to do? How come our kids are involved in this program?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. We have for a while done quite a bit of cross-grade work with students, and we've never had a parent ever question, their child working with a reading coach. And it is not just for students who are struggling with reading. So when we've had parents come in and kind of see what's going on, they can see these little partners all over the school, and when they ask and we explain, they're actually really impressed. And of course, we communicate with our parents about the program. The teachers communicate to the parents in their class of the students who are working with the reading coaches, and we communicate through newsletters about the program as well. So it's never a surprise, and we've had nothing but really great feedback from parents.
About how many lunchtime training sessions do you have to involve your coaches in before you match them up and they start working with their little buddies?
Well, we actually did probably the first week we probably met with them twice before we started to pair them up, and then we just kind of got them going. And then based on what we saw when we circulated in the beginning, we would then have follow-up meetings at least, once a week, probably for the first 6 weeks, just to make sure that, they understood what they were supposed to be doing in terms of the teaching of reading and the reading strategies, and if they themselves had any the reading coaches themselves, if they had any questions. And something that did come up early on was, if the younger student wasn't behaving, wasn't focusing, what do you do? And that's when I would just tell the reading coaches, no, just come and find me, or come and find Mrs. Rutley, and we will take care of that. And very quickly, the younger student understood the expectations, and they understood that if they weren't able to focus during this time, that they wouldn't be able to work with the older student. And very quickly, that usually solved the problem.
So I'm assuming that you're including all of your primary classes, or do you have any teachers who just have decided not to participate in this, or this is just a school-wide initiative?
All the teachers wanted to participate, and sometimes the teachers would adjust the schedule, so they might only want to use it once a week, or if they have a busy time coming up, we could adjust the schedule, and that was really easy to do.
Okay, great. So after 3 years, I think where do you see this program going? Like, it seems to be a solid part of the school culture, but what are potential next steps in this program?
Well, we've already been thinking about how to grow the program or how to continue it, and actually we've had some classes. Instead of just doing buddy work with their buddy class, they have been taking sort of the coaching model as well. So we've had writing coaches now where an intermediate class, the teacher taught the class writing strategies that they then taught to their younger buddy class. So I just think it's transforming this whole idea of not just buddies, but true coaches. And then we've also used reading coaches to provide that social emotional support to some of our students who need it. And while we still consider that sort of part of our reading coach, it's definitely something that is growing. So these kids actually teach self-regulation strategies. So we've had about 3 coaches this year sort of morph their role into more of that social emotional support or a teacher of self-regulation strategies, and I can see that being a key area that we would like to grow and explore.
Great, thanks, Nicole. So I think I'm going to ask just one final question. I'm curious, and I think our attendees would be curious as well too. Was there a particular aha for you? Was there some result from this program, either positive or negative, that you really hadn't anticipated?
Well, I think I was surprised how quickly the grade 6 and 7s owned the project. they truly became the leaders of it. And really, Lynn and I were just sort of, we just did some oversight. And when we circulated and would listen to the conversations, I was really impressed at how the reading coaches really took to heart the importance of focusing on the language of the reading strategies. So you could hear them say, you know, does that word look right? Oh, look at the picture to figure it out. And what really struck us was at the end, when we did our reading assessments at the end of the year, when we got to the questions about, you know, what strategies do you use as a reader? Now the grade 6s and 7s understood the whole gamut of reading strategies that they have been accessing, and now they have sort of the language and the understanding that they can identify what they are. And of course, we saw this to a lesser extent in our younger students as well.
Right. All right, Nicole, well, thank you so much for presenting today. I know that our attendees and others were quite interested in hearing what you had to say in the program, and certainly see, I'm certain, lots of applicability to their elementary context as well, too. So I'm certain that if we couldn't answer all of the questions today, you will likely be contacted by other people. We are going to post your webinar on our website at some point this week so that other people who will certainly benefit from your experience and the program that you've put in place. So thank you so much, Nicole. This has been really valuable for myself. I think as an elementary principal, I sort of see how I would love to sort of implement a program like this in my elementary school once I get back there, and I'm sure it was very valuable for our attendees as well.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Awesome. So just one more message for our attendees, and something I haven't put out there yet, but I will be putting out there soon. We are in the process of working with the Ministry of Education and Chief Educator Suzanne Hoffman to broaden our webinar series in the fall. The ministry wants to find ways to directly connect with school leaders on a number of initiatives, and so they have approached us to provide that webinar series. And so as we get through the summer and move the fall, look for us launching another webinar series really focused on ministry initiatives and with ministry personnel, so that our school leaders in the field have a really concrete understanding of the initiatives and implementation cycles for all of those new pieces that are coming from the ministry. So I'm excited to share that with you today. Thanks again, Nicole. This has just been a wonderful presentation, and I know that people will be quite excited to see if they can put something similar in place in their schools in the fall. And with that, I'm going to bring our webinar to a close, and thank you all for participating. And if this is the last time that we can connect online, best wishes as you move through June and bring your school year to a close. Thank you, everyone.